Commander Zexthal stood in the center of the training arena, his forearms crossed as he watched the newest batch of recruits fumble through basic combat drills. The Galactic Defense Corps had seen better days, and the quality of soldiers seemed to decline with each passing cycle. These young aliens from various worlds barely knew which end of a plasma rifle to hold, let alone how to use one effectively in combat. The arena buzzed with the sounds of missed shots and frustrated growls from a dozen different species. A Kytherian with crystalline skin kept overcharging his weapon, causing it to shut down every few minutes. Two Vorthan twins argued in their native clicking language about proper stance while their shots went wide of every target. Even the usually disciplined Nexari contingent seemed sluggish and unfocused. Zexthal's secondary eyes rolled in exasperation. How was he supposed to forge these creatures into a fighting force capable of defending the galaxy? The recent Void Raider attacks had shown just how unprepared the current military was. They needed soldiers who could think on their feet, adapt quickly, and work together seamlessly. What he had instead was a collection of individuals who could barely coordinate a simple flanking maneuver. The sound of approaching footsteps made him turn his primary head toward the arena entrance. Captain Veltar, his second-in-command, was escorting someone new. As they drew closer, Zexthal felt his mandibles click in surprise. The newcomer was unlike any species he had encountered in his 40 years of military service. The creature walked on two legs like an Nexari, but lacked their elegant, elongated proportions. Instead, it possessed a compact, muscular frame covered in pale skin and sparse fur only on its head. Its face was flat with forward-facing eyes, a trait usually associated with predatory species, yet it moved with a casual confidence that suggested intelligence rather than mere aggression. "Commander," Veltar said, coming to attention with a crisp salute, "this is the new recruit from the recently discovered world designated as Terra 3. Classification, human." The human stepped forward and attempted what Zexthal recognized as an approximation of a military salute, though the gesture was clearly foreign to its species. "Marcus Chen, sir. Reporting for training." Zexthal studied the newcomer with all four eyes. Humans were a recent addition to the Galactic Commonwealth, their world having been contacted only months ago. The initial reports had been interesting. A species that had somehow achieved spaceflight and sophisticated technology despite having no natural advantages like the Kytherians' crystal manipulation or the Nexari's telepathic coordination abilities. They were described as adaptable but unremarkable, neither particularly strong nor fast nor intelligent compared to other species. "Human," Zexthal said, tasting the unfamiliar word. "Your species has no military tradition with energy weapons, correct?" "Well, sir," Marcus replied, "we don't have plasma rifles or pulse cannons, but we've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know a thing or two about combat." A few nearby recruits stopped their training to listen, their various auditory organs perking up with curiosity. Zexthal noticed the slight emphasis the human placed on the word fighting, as if there were nuances his translator might be missing. "Indeed," Zexthal said. "Well, you will find that modern warfare is quite different from whatever primitive conflicts your world has experienced. Energy weapons, defensive shields, coordinated fleet actions, these require precision and discipline that takes years to master." Marcus nodded respectfully. "I'm eager to learn, sir." Something about the human's tone caught Zexthal's attention. There was no boastfulness, no false bravado that often accompanied recruits trying to impress their instructors. Just a simple statement of intent that somehow carried more weight than all the posturing he had heard from other species. "Very well. Veltar, get him equipped and integrated with Training Squad 7. We will see how quickly this human can adapt to civilized warfare." Over the following days, Zexthal found himself paying particular attention to the human recruit. Marcus Chen was assigned to one of the struggling squads, a mixed group of species that had shown poor coordination and even worse marksmanship. If anything, adding another unknown element should have made their performance worse. Instead, something curious began to happen. During the first weapons familiarization session, Marcus approached the standard-issue plasma rifle with the systematic thoroughness that Zexthal usually only saw in veteran soldiers. While other recruits focused on the weapon's power settings and targeting systems, the human examined every component, asking detailed questions about heat dissipation, energy cell replacement, and maintenance procedures. "It's like he's trying to understand the weapon completely," observed Instructor Chindel, a veteran Nexari who had been training recruits for 20 years. Most species focus on learning to use their equipment. This one wants to understand how it works. The observation proved accurate when, 3 days into weapons training, Marcus approached Zexthal with what appeared to be a partially disassembled plasma rifle. "Sir, I hope you don't mind, but I noticed something about the cooling system that might be causing some of the efficiency problems we've been having." Zexthal's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "Recruit, that weapon represents thousands of credits worth of advanced technology. It was not designed to be taken apart by untrained personnel." "I understand, sir, but look at this." Marcus held up a small component that glowed with residual energy. The thermal regulator is positioned too close to the primary energy conduit. During sustained fire, the heat buildup causes fluctuations in the plasma stream. If you moved it here instead. He indicated a different position within the weapon's housing. Despite his irritation, Zexthal found himself examining the human's proposed modification. The logic was sound, and the suggested repositioning would indeed improve heat management. It was the sort of insight that usually came from experienced weapons technicians, not raw recruits. "How did you determine this?" Zexthal asked. Marcus shrugged, a gesture Zexthal was learning indicated casual indifference in human body language. "I've worked with similar energy systems before. Different technology, same basic principles. Heat management is always a challenge when you're trying to maintain consistent output." "Your species has energy weapons?" "Not exactly like this, but we've developed some similar concepts. We're pretty good at figuring out how to make things work better." That casual confidence again. Not boastfulness, just a matter-of-fact statement that somehow carried implications Zexthal was only beginning to understand. The real revelation came during the first live-fire exercise. Squad 7 had been assigned a basic combat scenario: neutralize a series of automated targets while advancing through a mock battlefield. It was a standard drill that most squads completed with modest success after several attempts. Squad 7, with Marcus integrated into their formation, approached the exercise differently than any group Zexthal had observed. Instead of the usual frontal advance with covering fire, they began with what appeared to be chaos. The Kytherian, Dexic, suddenly veered left while the Vorthan twins split in opposite directions. The Nexari team member, Silana, moved to an elevated position that provided no clear line of sight to the targets. Zexthal was about to call a halt to the exercise when he realized what he was actually witnessing. It wasn't chaos at all. Every movement was coordinated, every position chosen with purpose. The human had somehow orchestrated a complex flanking maneuver that utilized each species' natural advantages while compensating for their weaknesses. Dexic's crystalline skin provided natural camouflage against the metallic training environment, making him nearly invisible as he approached from an unexpected angle. The Vorthan twins used their natural speed and agility to create moving targets that drew automated fire away from the main advance. Solana's position, while offering no direct firing solution, provided perfect telepathic coordination for the entire squad. And, in the center of it all, Marcus moved with a fluid precision that seemed to anticipate every development. When one of the Vorthans got pinned down by concentrated fire, the human was already moving to provide support. When Dexic's position was compromised, Marcus had already identified an alternative route. The exercise that usually took most squads 15 minutes to complete was finished in 4. More importantly, it was executed with a level of coordination and tactical awareness that Zexthal rarely saw even among veteran units. "How?" Veltar asked, echoing Zexthal's own thoughts as they watched the squad regroup with obvious satisfaction. They'd been training together for less than a week. Zexthal studied the human, who was reviewing the exercise with his squadmates, pointing out areas for improvement with the same casual competence he had shown with the plasma rifle. There was something about the way Marcus interacted with the other species that was difficult to define. He listened carefully when others spoke, asked questions that revealed understanding of their perspectives, and offered suggestions that built on their existing strengths rather than trying to impose his own methods. "I want to observe their next exercise," Zexthal decided. And the one after that. Over the following weeks, Squad 7's performance continued to improve in ways that defied standard training protocols. Marcus had somehow convinced Dexic to experiment with using his crystal manipulation abilities for more than just camouflage. The Kytherian discovered he could create temporary reflective surfaces to redirect laser fire or scatter light to confuse targeting systems. The Vorthan twins, Kex and Vex, developed a communication system based on their natural speed that allowed them to coordinate complex movements without relying on verbal commands. Sylana learned to extend her telepathic awareness to include non-telepathic species by reading their body language and emotional states with unprecedented accuracy. But it was Marcus himself who provided the most surprising developments. Despite being new to energy weapons, his marksmanship improved at a rate that shocked even veteran instructors. More importantly, his tactical awareness seemed to operate on multiple levels simultaneously. He could track individual squad members, monitor enemy positions, assess environmental factors, and plan several moves ahead, all while maintaining effective fire support. It's like he's running multiple scenarios in his head at the same time, Instructor Cheendal reported after observing a particularly complex training exercise. He anticipates problems before they develop and has solutions ready before they're needed. Zexthal was beginning to suspect that the initial reports about humans being unremarkable had been significantly inaccurate. This Marcus Chen displayed capabilities that were individually impressive and, collectively, unprecedented. The question was whether his abilities were representative of his species or if he was simply an exceptional individual. The answer came during what should have been a routine training exercise. Command had decided to test all the recruit squads with a new scenario designed to push their capabilities. The exercise involved defending a fortified position against waves of increasingly sophisticated automated attackers. Most squads were expected to hold out for 10 to 15 minutes before being overwhelmed. It was meant to teach recruits about the importance of resource management and tactical retreat. Squad 7 was scheduled to run the exercise on a Tuesday morning. Zexthal arrived early to observe, curious to see how Marcus and his team would handle the defensive scenario. He was surprised to find the human already in the briefing room, studying holographic displays of the exercise area with intense concentration. "Recruit Chen," Zexthal said. "The exercise doesn't begin for another hour." Marcus looked up from the display. "Yes, sir. I was just trying to understand the engagement parameters. This scenario is designed to be unwinnable, isn't it?" The directness of the question caught Zexthal off guard. Most recruits approached training exercises with the assumption that success was possible with sufficient effort and skill. Marcus had immediately identified the true purpose of the drill. "The exercise is designed to test decision-making under overwhelming pressure," Zexthal said carefully. "The focus is on how long you can maintain organized resistance and how effectively you can extract your team when defeat becomes inevitable." "Understood," Marcus said. "But the scenario assumes conventional defensive tactics, doesn't it? Static positions, predetermined fire lanes, traditional resource allocation? Those are standard defensive protocols used throughout the galaxy. They have proven effective across multiple species and combat environments." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Of course. But if the exercise is designed around defeating those standard protocols, then maybe the solution isn't to execute them better, but to do something unexpected." Before Zexthal could respond, the rest of Squad 7 began arriving for their pre-exercise briefing. He watched with growing interest as Marcus gathered his teammates around the holographic display and began explaining his assessment of the scenario. "The attack waves are programmed to exploit standard defensive weaknesses," Marcus said, manipulating the display to highlight different aspects of the battlefield. "They expect us to establish overlapping fields of fire from fixed positions and fall back in stages as each position becomes untenable." Dexic's crystalline features reflected the holographic light as he studied the terrain. "The automated attackers will adapt to our initial positions and focus fire accordingly. Standard doctrine says we should establish redundant defensive lines. Which is exactly what they're programmed to overcome," Sylana added, her telepathic abilities apparently picking up on Marcus's strategic thinking. "He's suggesting we abandon standard doctrine entirely." Kex and Vex exchanged rapid clicks in their native language before Kex spoke for both of them. "What did you have in mind?" Marcus smiled, an expression that Zexthal was learning indicated either amusement or anticipation in humans. "What if we don't defend the position at all? The suggestion was so contrary to the exercise parameters that for a moment nobody responded. The scenario specifically called for defending a fortified position. The very idea of abandoning it seemed to miss the point entirely. The objective is to maintain control of the designated area, Veltar pointed out. He had arrived during the discussion and was clearly struggling to understand Marcus's proposal. Is it? Marcus asked. Or is the objective to demonstrate effective tactical thinking under pressure? Because if it's the latter, then maybe we need to think about what effective really means. Zexthal found himself leaning forward with interest. The human was approaching the exercise from a completely different philosophical framework than any recruit he had encountered. Most species focused on executing established tactics more efficiently. Marcus was questioning the fundamental assumptions underlying those tactics. Explain your thinking, Zexthal said. Well, Marcus began, manipulating the holographic display to show different aspects of the battlefield. The exercise assumes we'll try to hold ground against superior numbers using superior position and fields of fire. But what if superior numbers and position aren't the real advantages here? He highlighted several features of the terrain that standard defensive doctrine would consider irrelevant. The automated attackers are programmed to respond to our positions and adapt their assault accordingly. They're essentially reacting to our choices. That means we have the initiative, even though we're supposedly on the defensive. Go on, Zexthal said, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. Instead of letting them dictate the terms of engagement by attacking our positions, what if we make them respond to us? What if we turn the whole scenario into a mobile engagement where their numbers become a disadvantage instead of an advantage? The concept was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of defending the fortified position, Squad 7 would use it as bait while conducting a mobile campaign that forced the automated attackers to spread their forces and react to constantly changing threats. It's certainly unconventional, Veltar said diplomatically. It's either brilliant or completely insane, Selana added with what Zexthal recognized as admiration in her mental emanations. Let's find out which, Marcus said. When the exercise began an hour later, Zexthal watched from the observation platform as Squad 7 implemented the most unorthodox defensive strategy he had ever witnessed. Instead of occupying the fortified positions, they used them as decoys, placing equipment and creating energy signatures that suggested standard defensive preparations while the actual squad members took positions throughout the surrounding terrain. When the first wave of automated attackers advanced on the fortified position, they found it apparently defended but strangely vulnerable. As they concentrated their assault on what appeared to be weakly defended positions, Squad 7 struck from completely unexpected angles. Dexic used his crystal manipulation to create false energy signatures that confused the attackers' targeting systems. The Vorthan twins moved at high speed through terrain that the automated systems had calculated as impassable for their body types. Selana coordinated the entire operation through a combination of telepathic awareness and pure tactical intuition. But it was Marcus who orchestrated the chaos into something resembling military precision. He seemed to understand the automated attackers' decision-making processes better than their programmers had intended. Every time the systems adapted to one set of tactics, he had already shifted to something new. The first wave was neutralized in 3 minutes. The second wave lasted slightly longer as the automated systems tried to compensate for the unexpected tactics, but Squad 7 had already moved to new positions and was implementing different strategies. By the fourth wave, something unprecedented happened. The automated attackers began making errors in judgment, pursuing targets that weren't there and leaving themselves vulnerable to attacks they hadn't anticipated. The programming that was supposed to adapt to conventional tactics couldn't process the constant tactical innovations that Squad 7 was generating. How long has the exercise been running? Zexthal asked Veltar. 37 minutes, sir. They've defeated 8 attack waves without losing a single squad member. That was more than double the previous record, achieved by a veteran squad with years of experience working together. Squad 7 had been training as a unit for less than a month. The exercise continued for another 20 minutes before the automated systems finally ran out of prepared scenarios. Squad 7 had not only held their assigned position but had systematically defeated every challenge the training program could generate. When the simulation ended, Zexthal found himself looking at 6 recruits who showed no signs of the exhaustion that usually accompanied extended combat exercises. If anything, they appeared energized by the experience, discussing the engagement with the enthusiasm of professionals who had just solved a particularly challenging problem. Recruit Chen, Zexthal called as the squad prepared to leave the training area. Marcus approached and came to attention with that slightly improvised salute that was becoming familiar. "Yes, sir?" "That was highly unconventional." "Yes, sir." "I hope we didn't break any important rules." Zexthal studied the human for a long moment. There was that casual confidence again, but now he was beginning to understand what lay behind it. Marcus genuinely believed that any problem could be solved if you understood it well enough and were willing to think creatively about solutions. "You turned a defensive exercise into an offensive campaign," Zexthal said. "We defended the position, sir. We just did it by making sure nobody could attack it effectively." The logic was unassailable, even if the methods were completely outside standard military doctrine. Squad 7 had achieved the exercise objectives more successfully than any previous unit while demonstrating tactical innovations that had potential applications far beyond training scenarios. "I want a full report on your tactical decisions," Zexthal said. "And I want to review your squad's training records from the beginning." "Yes, sir." As Marcus and his teammates left the training area, Zexthal found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about military training. If one human recruit could generate this kind of innovation and improvement in a mixed-species squad, what might be possible with broader integration of human tactical thinking? The question became more urgent 3 days later when Priority Command issued new orders. Intelligence had detected unusual Void Raider activity in the Kepler sector. Multiple raids had been reported, but the attackers were using tactics that didn't match previous Void Raider patterns. Traditional defensive measures were proving ineffective, and several established military units had suffered significant losses. Commander Zexthal was ordered to prepare a reconnaissance force capable of gathering intelligence on these new tactics while avoiding direct confrontation. It was exactly the sort of mission that required innovation, adaptability, and the ability to think beyond conventional military doctrine. As he reviewed the mission parameters, Zexthal found his thoughts returning to the human recruit and the squad that had somehow transformed from struggling beginners into tactical innovators in a matter of weeks. Perhaps it was time to discover just how much human adaptability could accomplish when the stakes were real. The briefing room felt different when Commander Zexthal announced that Squad 7 had been selected for active duty. The usual mix of excitement and nervousness that accompanied first deployments was replaced by something more complex. Marcus could sense the anticipation from his squadmates, but also an undercurrent of concern from the other training squads and instructors who had gathered to observe the briefing. "The Kepler sector situation has escalated," Zexthal began, activating a holographic display that showed star charts and recent intelligence reports. "Void Raider activity has increased dramatically over the past month, but their tactics have changed in ways that suggest either significant technological advancement or completely new strategic thinking." The hologram shifted to show battle damage reports from 3 different encounters. Ships that should have been able to handle standard Void Raider attacks had been systematically dismantled with surgical precision. Space stations that had withstood previous raids were left as expanding debris fields. Most disturbing, several encounters showed evidence that the Void Raiders had somehow anticipated and countered defensive measures that should have been unknown to them. "Traditional military responses have proven inadequate," Zexthal continued. "Intelligence suggests the Void Raiders are using adaptive tactics that evolve during combat, making conventional counter-strategies ineffective. Command requires reconnaissance teams capable of gathering intelligence while avoiding direct confrontation." Marcus studied the holographic displays with growing interest. The attack pattern showed a level of coordination and tactical flexibility that reminded him of something, though he couldn't immediately identify what. The Void Raiders were apparently abandoning their usual hit-and-run style in favor of prolonged engagements that allowed them to study and counter their opponents' responses. "Your mission," Zexthal said, looking directly at Squad 7, "is to conduct surveillance on Void Raider activity in the Kepler system while remaining undetected. You will not engage enemy forces directly unless absolutely necessary for survival. Your primary objective is to gather intelligence on these new tactics and return with actionable information. Captain Veltar stepped forward with additional briefing materials. You'll be deployed aboard the reconnaissance vessel Whisper's Edge, a modified courier ship with enhanced sensor arrays and stealth capabilities. The ship is designed for extended independent operations with minimal crew requirements. Marcus felt a familiar stirring of anticipation as the mission parameters took shape. It was the same feeling he had experienced during the training exercises, a sense that the challenges ahead could be met with creative thinking and adaptive strategies. But, this time, the stakes were real, and failure would have consequences far beyond training scores. "Sir," Solana said, "have previous reconnaissance missions provided any useful intelligence about these tactical changes?" Zexthal's mandibles clicked in. What Marcus had learned indicated frustration. 3 previous missions have been attempted. 2 returned with minimal intelligence after detecting Void Raider forces but being unable to observe their operations without risking exposure. The 3rd mission. He paused, checking his data pad. The 3rd mission has not returned and is presumed lost. The briefing room fell quiet as the implications settled in. This wasn't just a challenging assignment, it was a mission that had already proven beyond the capabilities of experienced reconnaissance teams. The fact that Squad 7, a group of recruits barely out of basic training, was being assigned to the mission suggested either remarkable confidence in their abilities or a shortage of alternatives. "Questions?" Zexthal asked. Marcus raised his hand. "Sir, do we have any tactical analysis of the previous missions? Understanding why they failed might help us avoid similar problems." "Limited information is available," Veltar replied, activating a new section of the holographic display. The first mission maintained safe distances but was unable to gather detailed intelligence. The second mission attempted closer observation and was detected by Void Raider patrols, forcing an emergency retreat. The third mission's fate is unknown, but their last transmission indicated they had identified what appeared to be a command vessel. "What made them think it was a command vessel?" Dexic asked, his crystalline features reflecting the holographic light. "Enhanced communications arrays and what appeared to be coordinated fleet movements centered around that particular ship," Zexthal explained. Marcus studied the incomplete data from the lost mission with growing understanding. The third team had made the same assumption that military doctrine suggested, that centralized command and control would be located in an obvious flagship that coordinated subordinate units. But what if the Void Raiders had evolved beyond that model? "Sir," Marcus said carefully, "what if the apparent command vessel was actually bait?" The question drew surprised looks from around the briefing room. Zexthal's primary eyes focused on Marcus with sharp attention. "Explain your reasoning." "Well, if the Void Raiders are using adaptive tactics that evolved during combat, they're probably also learning from their encounters with our reconnaissance efforts. They would know we're trying to identify command and control structures. What if they started using false command signatures to draw in observation teams?" The logic was uncomfortable but sound. If the Void Raiders were indeed adapting their tactics based on enemy responses, they would naturally develop countermeasures for reconnaissance efforts just as they had for direct military confrontation. "That would mean the third mission walked into a trap," Veltar said grimly. "It would also mean the Void Raiders are more sophisticated than our current intelligence assessments suggest," Zexthal added. "If they're capable of that level of strategic deception, traditional reconnaissance methods may be fundamentally inadequate." Marcus felt the familiar sense of a puzzle presenting itself for solution. The challenge wasn't just gathering intelligence on Void Raider tactics, it was doing so against an enemy that was actively adapting to counter-intelligence gathering efforts. It was like the training exercises, but with an opponent that learned and evolved in real time. "What if we approached this completely differently?" Marcus suggested. "How so?" "Instead of trying to observe them without being detected, what if we let them detect us but control how they detect us? What if we made them think they understand what we're doing while we gather intelligence on how they respond to different stimuli?" The concept was audacious even by Marcus's standards. Instead of passive observation, Squad 7 would conduct active intelligence gathering by deliberately triggering Void Raider responses and studying their adaptive patterns. "That's extremely dangerous," Zexthal said. "You'd be presenting yourselves as targets while trying to gather intelligence." "Yes, sir, but we'd be targets that control the engagement parameters. We choose when and how to make contact, what kind of threat profile to present, and when to disengage. Instead of trying to study them from a distance, we study how they react to us. Solana's mental emanations reflected growing excitement as she understood the implications. We could learn more about their tactical adaptation by forcing them to adapt to us than by trying to observe their standard operations. Kex and Vex exchanged rapid clicks before Kex spoke for both of them. It's like the training exercise where we turn defense into offense. We're turning reconnaissance into controlled engagement. The risks are substantial, Veltar pointed out. If your assessment of their capabilities is wrong, you could find yourselves outmaneuvered by an enemy that's more sophisticated than you anticipated. True, Marcus agreed. But, if our assessment is right, we'll gather intelligence that passive observation could never provide. We'll understand not just what they're doing, but how they think and how quickly they can adapt to new situations. Zexthal studied the proposed modification to the mission parameters with all four eyes. The human recruit was once again suggesting an approach that contradicted established doctrine while offering the potential for unprecedented results. The parallels to the training exercise were obvious, but the stakes were infinitely higher. I need time to consider this proposal, Zexthal said finally. Squad 7, you have 6 hours to develop detailed operational plans for both conventional reconnaissance and this adaptive intelligence gathering approach. I want contingency plans, risk assessments, and abort criteria for both options. As the briefing ended and other personnel filed out of the room, Marcus found himself alone with his squadmates, facing the challenge of turning an unconventional concept into a workable operational plan. This is either going to be brilliant or get us all killed, Dexic observed with characteristic Kytherian directness. Probably both, Solana added with telepathic humor that Marcus was learning to recognize. They spent the next 6 hours in intensive planning sessions, developing operational frameworks that would allow them to gather intelligence through controlled engagement while maintaining the ability to disengage if the situation became untenable. The plans required precise coordination between all squad members, with each species' natural abilities integrated into a flexible tactical system. Dexic would use his crystal manipulation to create false sensor signatures and decoy targets that would confuse Void Raider targeting systems while providing cover for the rest of the squad. The Vorthan twins would handle high-speed reconnaissance and rapid repositioning, using their natural agility to gather close-range intelligence while maintaining mobility. Solana would coordinate the entire operation through telepathic awareness while monitoring Void Raider communication patterns for signs of tactical adaptation. Marcus would serve as tactical coordinator and primary interface with the ship's systems, managing the overall engagement profile while ensuring that Squad 7 maintained the initiative throughout each encounter. When they presented their plans to Zexthal, the commander studied the proposals with obvious fascination. The operational framework was unlike anything in standard military doctrine, yet it addressed the specific challenges of intelligence gathering against an adaptive enemy with innovative solutions. Your conventional reconnaissance plan is competent but unremarkable, Zexthal said. Your adaptive intelligence plan is either revolutionary or suicidal. Given the failure of conventional approaches, I'm inclined to authorize the experimental option. Sir? Veltar said with obvious concern. Captain, we have lost one reconnaissance team and gained minimal intelligence from 2 others using standard procedures. The Void Raider threat is growing, and we need actionable intelligence about their new capabilities. Squad 7 has demonstrated tactical innovation that exceeds anything I've seen from veteran units. If they believe they can gather intelligence through controlled engagement, I'm willing to let them try. The authorization came with strict parameters and abort criteria, but Squad 7 was cleared for deployment with their experimental intelligence gathering mission. They had 48 hours to prepare before departure aboard the Whisper's Edge. The preparation period revealed yet another aspect of Marcus's approach that impressed his squadmates. Instead of focusing solely on tactics and equipment, he insisted on spending time understanding the ship they would be using and the crew they would be working with. The Whisper's Edge was operated by a 3-person crew of specialists in stealth operations. Captain Lyra Voss was a Nexari with natural telepathic abilities enhanced by technological implants that allowed her to interface directly with the ship's systems. Chief Engineer Korf was a massive Threnodai whose forearms and technical expertise made him ideal for managing the complex systems required for extended stealth operations. Navigation Officer Zara was a young Kytherian whose crystal-based computational abilities provided unparalleled accuracy in spacefold calculations. Marcus spent hours with each crew member, learning not just what they could do but how they preferred to work and what they needed to perform at their best. By the time Squad 7 boarded the ship, they had developed working relationships that felt more like an extended team than separate military units. "I've never seen anyone integrate with ship's crew that quickly," Captain Voss told Zexthal during the pre-departure briefing. "Usually it takes weeks for ground troops to learn to work effectively with ship operations. Your squad was coordinating with my people like they'd been training together for months." "The human appears to have a talent for understanding how different individuals and systems can work together most effectively," Zexthal replied. "It's one of the reasons I approved this mission." The Whisper's Edge departed the training station on schedule, its destination a monitoring position on the edge of the Kepler system where void raider activity had been most recently detected. The journey would take 3 days, providing additional time for Squad 7 to refine their plans and practice their coordination with the ship's crew. During the transit, Marcus found himself studying everything he could about void raider history and previous tactical patterns. The intelligence files painted a picture of a nomadic civilization that had developed military technology through constant warfare with multiple species. Their ships were fast and well-armed, but their tactics had traditionally relied on overwhelming firepower and hit-and-run strategies that avoided prolonged engagements. The recent tactical evolution suggested either significant technological advancement or fundamental changes in void raider strategic thinking. Marcus suspected the latter, which meant understanding their new capabilities would require understanding how they processed and adapted to new information during combat. "It's like they're learning," he told Silana during one of their planning sessions. "Not just adapting to specific threats, but actually learning new ways to think about combat." "That would explain why conventional responses have been ineffective," she replied. "If they're developing genuinely new tactical concepts in real time, our doctrine-based approaches would be fundamentally inadequate." The insight reinforced Marcus's conviction that their experimental approach was necessary. Studying an enemy that learned and adapted in real time required intelligence-gathering methods that could evolve just as quickly. When the Whisper's Edge reached the edge of the Kepler system, initial sensor sweeps confirmed the presence of void raider forces operating in the inner system. The enemy ships appeared to be conducting coordinated operations around the system's industrial stations, but their movement patterns were unlike anything in previous intelligence reports. "They're not raiding," Captain Voss observed as she reviewed the sensor data. "They're conducting what looks like systematic research on the station's defensive capabilities." "That's consistent with learning behavior," Marcus said. "They're not just attacking targets of opportunity, they're studying how different defensive systems work so they can develop better countermeasures." The revelation added urgency to their mission. If the Void Raiders were indeed conducting systematic research on Commonwealth defensive capabilities, the intelligence they gathered would eventually make them nearly impossible to stop using conventional military responses. Squad 7's experimental mission had just become far more important than anyone had realized when they departed. They weren't just gathering intelligence on new Void Raider tactics, they were potentially the key to preventing those tactics from evolving beyond the Commonwealth's ability to counter them. As the Whisper's Edge moved into position to begin the intelligence-gathering operation, Marcus felt the familiar anticipation that accompanied challenging problems. But, this time, the stakes extended far beyond training exercises or personal achievement. The survival of the Galactic Commonwealth might depend on whether a human recruit and his mixed-species squad could outsmart an enemy that was learning to be unstoppable. The first phase of their operation would begin in 6 hours, when the Void Raider forces resumed their research activities around the nearest industrial station. Squad 7 would finally discover whether their innovative approach to intelligence gathering would provide the breakthrough that the Commonwealth desperately needed, or whether they would simply become the latest casualties in an increasingly one-sided conflict. Either way, Marcus thought as he reviewed their operational plans one final time, it was going to be interesting. The first contact with Void Raider forces came exactly as Marcus had predicted, but not at all how anyone else had expected. Squad 7 didn't attempt to hide from the enemy patrol that detected the Whisper's Edge. Instead, they let themselves be spotted while projecting the sensor signature of a damaged courier ship attempting emergency repairs. Contact bearing 07 Mark IV, Navigation Officer Zara reported from her crystal-enhanced sensor station. 3 Void Raider vessels altering course to intercept. Estimated arrival time, 18 minutes. Marcus watched the tactical display with satisfaction as the enemy ships responded exactly as he had hoped. The Void Raiders were approaching cautiously but deliberately, their formation indicating they expected to find a disabled civilian vessel rather than a military reconnaissance team. Phase 1 is working perfectly, he told Captain Voss. They're taking the bait, but they're being careful about it. That tells us they've learned to be suspicious of easy targets. Which means they've evolved beyond simple raiding behavior, Solana added from her position at the communications monitoring station. I'm detecting increased chatter between their ships. They're coordinating their approach more carefully than historical patterns suggest. The intelligence gathering had begun before the first shot was fired. By observing how the Void Raiders approached what they believed was a vulnerable target, Squad 7 was learning about their current tactical thinking and level of coordination. 15 minutes to contact, Zara announced. Their scanning patterns indicate they're trying to determine our actual capabilities before closing to engagement range. Let them scan, Marcus said. Dexic, are you ready with the false signatures? The Kytherian's crystalline features reflected the bridge lighting as he manipulated his portable crystal matrix to create electromagnetic patterns that would confuse enemy sensors. I can project the signature of a damaged plasma drive and compromised defensive systems. To their scanners, we'll look like we're barely functional. Perfect. Kex, Vex, are your reconnaissance drones ready for deployment? The Vorthan twins exchanged rapid clicks before Kex responded. 6 stealth drones prepared for high-speed intelligence gathering. We can deploy them as soon as the Void Raiders close to within optimal range. Marcus turned to Chief Engineer Korf, whose 4 massive arms were already busy preparing the ship's actual defensive systems. How quickly can we drop the false signatures and go to full combat readiness if we need to abort? 30 seconds to full military configuration, Korf rumbled in his deep voice. Though I still think this plan involves an unreasonable amount of risk. Calculated risk, Marcus corrected. We're controlling the engagement parameters. If they respond the way we expect, we learn about their tactical adaptation. If they surprise us, we abort and retreat with whatever intelligence we've gathered. Captain Voss studied the approaching ships with obvious concern. 10 minutes to contact. They're maintaining formation integrity but adjusting their approach vector. Someone over there is thinking tactically. The observation confirmed what Marcus had suspected. The Void Raiders weren't just following standard attack protocols. They were analyzing the situation and adapting their approach based on what their sensors told them about their target. That's exactly what we wanted to know, Marcus said. They're thinking, not just reacting. Solana, are you picking up any communication patterns that might indicate command structure? Interesting, she replied, her telepathic abilities enhanced by the ship's communication monitoring equipment. The chatter between ships isn't following traditional hierarchical patterns. It's more like collaborative decision-making. They're sharing information and reaching consensus rather than receiving orders from a central authority. The revelation was significant. If the Void Raiders had evolved beyond centralized command structures to distributed decision-making, it would explain why traditional military responses had proven inadequate. They weren't fighting a conventional fleet with predictable command and control vulnerabilities. They were facing a collective intelligence that could adapt and learn at multiple levels simultaneously. 5 minutes to contact, Zara announced. They're splitting formation. 2 ships maintaining approach trajectory, 1 moving to flanking position. Marcus felt a familiar thrill of anticipation as the tactical situation developed. The Void Raiders were demonstrating exactly the kind of adaptive thinking that made them so dangerous, but they were also revealing information about how that thinking worked. They're hedging their bets, he observed. They want to capture or disable us if we're really damaged, but they're positioning for a coordinated attack if we're not what we appear to be. Which suggests they've encountered deception tactics before, Captain Voss added. They've learned to be suspicious. And that learning is exactly what we need to understand. Dexic, initiate emergency repair scenarios. Make it look like we're trying to get our engines back online. The Kytherian adjusted his crystal matrix to project energy signatures consistent with desperate repair attempts. To Void Raider sensors, the Whisper's Edge would appear to be a civilian vessel with damaged systems trying to restore basic functionality. 2 minutes to contact, Zara reported. Lead ship is hailing us. Marcus exchanged glances with Captain Voss. They had prepared for this possibility, but actually communicating with Void Raiders would provide intelligence opportunities they hadn't originally anticipated. Put them through, Marcus said. But keep monitoring all their communications. This is our chance to learn how they process information in real time. The main display activated to show the bridge of the lead Void Raider vessel. The commander was a species Marcus didn't recognize, with features that suggested both intelligence and predatory instincts. When it spoke, the ship's translator converted its words into standard Commonwealth language. Unknown vessel, you have entered territory under Void Raider control. State your identity and purpose. Captain Voss responded with what they had rehearsed, identifying the ship as a civilian courier that had suffered drive failures while carrying medical supplies to outer colonies. The story was believable and designed to elicit specific responses that would reveal Void Raider decision-making processes. Medical supplies, the Void Raider commander repeated, its expression difficult to read. You will submit to boarding and inspection. Comply immediately or be destroyed. Understood, Captain Voss replied. Our docking systems are damaged, but we'll try to accommodate your requirements. As the communication ended, Marcus turned to his squad. Did everyone catch that? They didn't immediately attack or demand surrender, Selena observed. They want to inspect our cargo. That suggests they're interested in what we're carrying, not just in destroying us. More importantly, Dexic added, the commander didn't make that decision unilaterally. I detected data exchanges with the other ships before the response was formulated. Distributed decision-making confirmed, Marcus said with satisfaction. They're not following orders from above, they're collaborating on tactical decisions in real time. That's a completely different organizational model than anything in our military doctrine. The implications were staggering. Commonwealth forces had been trying to defeat an enemy using tactics designed for hierarchical command structures, while the Void Raiders had evolved into something much more flexible and adaptive. 30 seconds to docking range, Zara announced. The flanking ship is moving to a position that would prevent our escape if we tried to run. Perfect, Marcus said. Kex, Vex, deploy your reconnaissance drones now. Target the flanking ship and the trailing vessel. I want detailed scans of their weapons, sensors, and communication systems. The Vorthan twins activated their high-speed drones, tiny reconnaissance devices that could gather detailed intelligence while remaining virtually undetectable. As the drones raced toward their targets, Squad 7 prepared for the most dangerous phase of their operation. Boarding party launching from the lead ship, Captain Voss reported. 6 individuals in powered armor, heavily armed. Let them come aboard, Marcus said. But be ready to implement abort protocols if the situation deteriorates. Our primary objective is intelligence gathering, not heroics. The next 20 minutes provided more intelligence about Void Raider operations than the previous reconnaissance missions combined. The boarding party was professional and efficient, but their methods revealed crucial information about their technological capabilities and tactical thinking. The Void Raider troops used scanning equipment that was more sophisticated than Commonwealth intelligence had estimated, but they also showed evidence of tactical flexibility that went beyond simple training. When they encountered systems they didn't immediately recognize, they adapted their scanning procedures in real time, sharing information with their ship and adjusting their approach based on feedback. They're learning as they work, Selena reported through private communication channels. Their scanning patterns are evolving based on what they discover about our ship's configuration. Meanwhile, the reconnaissance drones were gathering detailed intelligence on the Void Raider vessels. The ship's designs were more advanced than expected, with modular weapon systems that could be reconfigured rapidly and sensor arrays that appeared to be constantly evolving their scanning patterns. Their technology isn't just advanced, Kex reported through secure channels. It's adaptive. Their weapons and sensors modify their capabilities based on what they encounter. The revelation explained why conventional defensive measures had proven ineffective. Commonwealth forces weren't just fighting an adaptive enemy, they were fighting adaptive technology that learned and evolved during combat. As the boarding inspection continued, Marcus realized they had gathered enough intelligence to justify the mission, but an opportunity was presenting itself that might provide even more valuable information. "Captain," he said quietly to Captain Voss, "what if we let them take us prisoner?" The suggestion drew shocked looks from around the bridge. Even for Marcus, the idea of voluntary capture was audacious beyond previous experience. "Explain your reasoning," Captain Voss said carefully. "They're not destroying us or taking our cargo," Marcus replied. "Their behavior suggests they're more interested in gathering intelligence than in simple raiding. If they take us prisoner, we might have the opportunity to observe their operations from the inside. That's extremely dangerous," Chief Engineer Korf pointed out. "If they discover we're military personnel conducting reconnaissance, they'll execute us immediately." "True," Marcus agreed. "But if they believe we're civilian crew members, we might be able to observe their base operations, command structure, and decision-making processes directly. The intelligence we could gather would be unprecedented." Solana's telepathic abilities were focused on monitoring the boarding party's mental emanations. "They're definitely interested in more than just cargo," she reported. "I'm detecting curiosity about our ship's configuration and routes we've traveled." "They want information. Which means they might keep us alive for interrogation," Marcus concluded. "And interrogation means we'd be taken to their operational base, where we could observe their organization and capabilities directly." The decision was complex and dangerous, but the potential intelligence value was enormous. If Squad 7 could observe Void Raider operations from the inside, they might discover vulnerabilities that could turn the tide of the conflict. "I need consensus from the squad," Marcus said. "This isn't a decision I can make unilaterally." One by one, his squad mates agreed to the risk. They had come this far using unconventional methods that had proven more effective than traditional approaches. The opportunity to gather intelligence from within Void Raider operations was too valuable to ignore. Captain Voss and her crew were more reluctant, but they eventually agreed to the modified plan. The Whisper's Edge would submit to capture while maintaining the appearance of a civilian vessel, with the crew and Squad 7 posing as merchants and passengers caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The transition from voluntary prisoners to intelligence assets required careful acting and precise coordination. When the Void Raider boarding party completed their inspection and decided to take the ship and crew for further interrogation, Squad 7 had to appear appropriately frightened while actually preparing for the most dangerous intelligence-gathering operation any of them had ever attempted. The journey to the Void Raider base took 6 hours and revealed even more about their organizational capabilities. The base itself was a massive mobile station that could relocate as needed, equipped with manufacturing facilities, research laboratories, and what appeared to be educational institutions. "They're not just raiders," Marcus observed as they were escorted through the station's corridors. "They're a complete civilization that's organized around continuous warfare and adaptation." The interrogations that followed provided opportunities to observe Void Raider decision-making processes directly. The interrogators weren't following standard protocols, they were adapting their questioning based on the responses they received, sharing information with other interrogators, and collaborating on strategies in real time. "It's like they're a collective intelligence," Solana reported during a brief moment when they could communicate privately. "Individual decisions are made collaboratively, with information shared throughout their organization almost instantaneously." The observation explained why conventional military tactics had proven inadequate. Commonwealth forces were designed to fight enemies with recognizable command structures and predictable decision-making processes. The Void Raiders had evolved into something fundamentally different, a distributed intelligence that could adapt and learn faster than traditional military organizations could respond. But the same characteristics that made them so formidable also created potential vulnerabilities. A collective intelligence that shared information instantly was potentially vulnerable to information warfare. If the right kind of disruptive information could be introduced into their communication networks, it might be possible to confuse or misdirect their decision-making processes. Marcus began developing a plan that was audacious even by his standards. Instead of simply gathering intelligence and escaping, Squad 7 could potentially turn their capture into an opportunity to conduct information warfare against the Void Raider collective intelligence. The plan required precise timing, careful coordination, and a level of risk that exceeded anything they had attempted before. But, if successful, it could provide the Commonwealth with the breakthrough it needed to counter the Void Raider threat effectively. As he watched the collective decision-making processes that governed every aspect of Void Raider operations, Marcus realized that the key to defeating them wasn't superior firepower or better tactics. It was understanding that they had evolved beyond anything Commonwealth military doctrine was designed to counter. But, evolution worked in both directions. If the Void Raiders could adapt and learn, so could human-led mixed-species teams that approached problems with genuine creativity and flexibility. The question was whether Squad 7 could implement their information warfare plan before their true identities were discovered. They had perhaps 12 hours before the Void Raiders completed their interrogation processes and decided what to do with their prisoners. 12 hours to turn the tables on an enemy that had seemed unstoppable, using nothing but creative thinking and the willingness to attempt something that had never been tried before. Marcus looked at his squadmates and saw the same determination that had carried them through training exercises and reconnaissance missions. They had come this far by refusing to accept that any problem was unsolvable. Time to discover whether human adaptability could outpace Void Raider evolution in the ultimate test of creative problem-solving under pressure. The final phase of their mission was about to begin, and failure would mean not just their deaths, but the loss of intelligence that might be the Commonwealth's last hope for survival. But success could change the balance of the entire conflict, proving that some advantages couldn't be programmed or evolved. They had to be imagined, planned, and implemented by individuals willing to risk everything on the conviction that any challenge could be overcome with sufficient creativity and determination. Marcus smiled as he began explaining his plan to his squadmates. It was going to be the greatest challenge any of them had ever faced. Which meant it was going to be interesting.